my part of the discussion will be kind of a crash course in anime, in what it is, because I realize not everybody knows exactly what we're talking about. People think Pokemon, or they think of Hayao Miyazaki's epics for Studio Ghibli. And of course, those are very different products. So what do we mean when we talk about anime? Well, I ended up writing this book, not 40 years ago, but it's called Japan America, and it was commissioned by my publisher, Macmillan, in New York. And they asked me to write a book about Japanese pop culture in the United States. And I first said no because I was not an otaku. I was not a geek fan, a maniac fan of Japanese pop culture. I had been to Japan in kindergarten many, many years ago, and I loved Doraemon. And if any of you are old enough, Ultraman Taro, Ultraman from the Ultraman series. I was crazy about those shows, but I also was living back in the United States after that and sort of acclimated back to US culture. So I said, no, I didn't think this was a good idea. And then one of the editors said, well, why don't you write a book for someone like your dad? And my dad's the American side of the family. My mother's the Japanese side. So then I thought, oh, okay, all right, because he doesn't know anything about this. So if it's for him, I can do it. And the book is called Japan America. Of course, I'm Japanese American, so it was a sort of perfect way for me to also write about my life. And I think the reason the book still sells is because there's quite a personal voice to it. It's first person. It has something about my background, my experience woven into a discussion of anime and manga. Now, what is anime? First of all, the word, many of you probably know, is a truncation, typical Japanese truncation of a foreign loan word, animation, although some people say it's French in origin. I've never found evidence of that. In any case, it's anime. But what is interesting is that when you're in Japan, and you walk into a shop and say, I want to see your anime section, they could show you Disney, they could show you Pixar, they could show you French animation from anywhere. So anime inside Japan is just animation. But as soon as you get on a plane at Haneda and fly out over the Pacific, anime means Japanese animation. So it actually has two meanings depending on where you are, which is one of those fascinating Japanese paradoxes. But what I found more interesting, and the reason I pursued this subject, is because the essence of anime is really doing more with less, which I find sort of Japanese ethos that runs throughout the arts, the cuisine, the country itself, a country of very few resources, natural resources, that has done so much on the world stage with very little at its disposal. So what happens with animation? Well, you can't talk about anime, honestly talk about manga or anime without talking about this gentleman, Osamu Tezuka, who was born in 1928, died at the age of 60 in 1989, almost the exact dates of the Showa Jidai, the Showa era. So he's a fascinating figure historically and culturally and artistically. And friends of mine who were here in Japan when he died 1 month after Emperor Hirohito. So 1 month after the emperor, and friends of mine who were here said it was like when John Lennon was shot in New York City, the shock of his death at the age of 60, still relatively young age of 60. What Tezuka pioneered was a visual art form that is stylistically arguably more vibrant, more kinetic, and more adventurous in terms of storytelling than any other manga or anime artist. There is as always, there's a kind of kickback, revisionist view of that era in time, where there are some academics who say it wasn't just Tezuka, and that's true. There were other artists who were working at that time. But Tezuka, I think it's hard to argue against the amount of material he produced and the variety of material he produced. He arguably started the mecha genre in anime, which is giant robots. He arguably started the shoujo, or girls manga, and romance stories. He, of course, is the creator of Astro Boy, or Tetsuwan Atom, great children's stories, but he also created adult stories, some very erotic stories. Some stories he wrote a manga about a sort of alternative universe of Hitler. He wrote a manga about Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. So this was not your normal Disney kind of guy. And the other thing about him is he pioneered an approach to comics, which of course arguably came from outside of Japan and then were sort of mingled with Japan's traditional visual artistic products, such as ukiyo-e, or woodblock prints, and imakimono, scroll paintings. And Tezuka would take some of those techniques and apply them to this new form, newish form that came from the West, which was comics. And one of the things he wanted to do was to make comics more cinematic. He wanted them to expand the action and give the viewer a more intimate experience of that action. So this is from, believe it or not, from 1947. So right after the war. Tezuka is famous for revising his work too, so this may have been revised by him later. But I use this as a quick way of showing you how, compared to the typical Western comic with full color, very expensive pages, full color pages, and a big shot of Superman soaring over Metropolis, you know, with the 3D effects, the ridged muscles, etc. This is manga, black and white, cheap paper, really cheap disposable paper, and instead of this single shot of action, or a biff and a boom, and that kind of physicality, you get this breakdown of cinematic action. And you follow it right to left, as you can see. I'm not going to go into the story because I don't have time, but as you can see, this guy plowing his car ahead, and he's about to hit a puppy dog, a very kawaii, cute puppy dog. But what I want to draw your attention to is this frame in the top of the middle. I mean, it's almost like abstract art. What are we looking at? We're looking at a pupil, which could look a little like Pac-Man, with a puppy in the middle of the pupil. That's an entire frame of this very cinematic scene. This is happening in 1947, as I said. So Tezuka really was a groundbreaking artist, and you're going to hear his name quite a bit in the next few years, because 2028 is the centennial of his birth. And there are a lot of projects, museum projects. I'm happy to say I'm working on a couple of projects to make the rest of the world aware of Tezuka's place and role, because anime is so popular worldwide now, and yet not many people know how important Tezuka was. The other thing he did, of course, he wanted to make anime, just as his love of cinema, he wanted to make things that moved. And in Japan, for a while, you couldn't afford to make animation. So the animation that was shown on Japanese TV was Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers, American stuff. But Tezuka wanted to make animation, and so the techniques he pioneered and employed, and he was not the only one. There are other people who use what we call limited animation. But Tezuka really dove in, really leaned into limited animation, as have many other anime artists over the years, so much so that it's become like a tick, like a technique in anime. This is an easy way to explain limited animation. It's oversimplified, but if you talk about full animation, which is on the bottom, You have to draw each individual movement of the character. Very expensive, right? Every movement of the character. If you think of those, I don't know if they still do this, but those flip books we did in school, where you drew something in the corner and then you keep changing the movie, and then you flip through it and it looks like it's moving, right? That's more like full animation. Limited animation, you can take one drawing and just move the drawing. Move the background behind the drawing, slide something behind the drawing, make another angle on the drawing, but it's only a single drawing. And so it costs much less to do. So limited animation, and now I have to give you some examples because we're talking about anime, which is a moving art form. And I think here you'll get this example. If you could turn up the volume on the audio, this is a bit quiet, this clip. But I'm honored to say this is a clip of me and one of my dear friends, Frederick L. Schott, who some of you may have heard of, wrote an incredible book called Manga. And Fred actually worked with Tezuka as his interpreter and was one of the first people to translate Tezuka's work. And we're talking a bit about how he used limited animation.
Oh, the tick that developed was creating limited animation, which is kind of herky-jerky movements that you see in early Astro Boy.
Well, this is like Foggy Bottom. You really think there's a monster lurking there? It's hard to say.
Tezuka was able to knock the number of frames down per second way, way down to 8 or 12, 10, which is extreme. He did use a lot of sort of almost still shots. On a limited budget, you could stretch out how much footage you were going to generate, and you could concentrate on the storytelling and concentrate on character development.
But it became a kind of technique for anime artists, throughout the years, including now. And yet Tezuka often laughed because he wanted to create the fluidity of Disney.
The idea behind the appeal of limited animation, I've always tried to explain to the appeal of live drumming. I play the drums amateur-wise, and when I was a kid, my music teachers always told me there's no future in drumming because everything's going to be electronic in the future. There was something very famous, I think it was German, called the Linn drum machine, Linn. And everybody was using it in 80s pop music and commercials and stuff, and they said nobody's going to want to hear actual physical drumming. Well, here we are in 2025, and there's still drummers playing all over the place. There's a drummer in the back of the room here. Excellent drummer, yes. And part of the reason for that is that people, even unconsciously, hear the slight imperfections of real drumming that isn't computerized, that isn't exactly on the beat. And when you hear, even unconsciously, those slight imperfections, your mind engages and fills them in. Your mind actually gets into the picture, gets into the drumming, and fills in the sound. And that's very appealing. So part of the appeal of this limited animation and kind of super flat imagery, which is almost no use of three-dimensional technique, is that your mind is able to get into the picture and fill it in. And the simplest way I can define that is the success, extraordinary success of Hello Kitty, which is, I think, 16 lines and no mouth. Unbelievably simple, super flat expression, and it's so popular. Kitty-chan is sold all over the world, is one of the top 2, I think right after Pokemon, is media franchises in the world, Sanrio's Hello Kitty. And your mind is able to go in and do what it wants with that image. It hasn't been done for you. And so as another example of limited animation, some of you will recognize this opening. This was one of the first television series that made it big after Astro Boy outside of Japan.
he's a demon on wheels. He's a demon and he's gonna be chasing after someone. He's gaining on you, so you better look alive. He's busy revving up the powerful Mach 5. And when the odds are against him and there's dangerous work to do, bet your life's eraser, see it through. Go speed racer, go speed racer, go speed racer, go. He's up and flying as he guns a car around the track. He's jamming down the pedal like he's never coming back. Adventure's waiting just ahead. Go speed racer, go speed racer, go speed racer, go.
So I wanted you to see that, especially at the end. It's that one drawing and they just spin it around, right? But the other aspect to this technique of limited animation is that you have more room to explore storytelling. You're not emphasizing totally fluid movements, so instead you go into story, the elaboration of story and character psychology, and in addition to that, you really, as you saw at the end of that Speed Racer clip, you have to focus on poses. The characters' stylized poses and looks become very, very important because they're not moving as fluidly. So if you think of the appeal of giant robots like Gundam, and you think of the appeal of characters in anime images, a lot of it has to do with the way they're posing. I'm not kidding. And you can see that at the end of... Tai Chi. Yes, right, exactly. You can see it at the end of that clip, that pose of Speed in the clip, and then it's just spun around like a daisy wheel. So it gives you room for a different kind of expression. And I'm going to jump ahead and show you what's happening now. This is the
final battle.
Most
These words echo in my
anime
mind.
in the world, Kimetsu no Yaiba or Demon Slayer. And you still see
This
the use
battle may finally
of
reach
this
its conclusion
posing
tonight.
and limited movement. Look at this right here.
What a wonderful night. It's been a while, hasn't it? Zenitsu.
Let's kick things off, shall we? It's time we had some fun.
Coming to IMAX and a theater near you in September. So what's going on? It's incredibly attractive medium for Gen Z and millennials, outrageously attractive. A survey came out a few months ago about how in the United States, anime was more popular than the NFL. This is a projection from Polaris Group, and you can see the stats here. 9.5% is the projected growth from 31.7 billion in 2023 to, in less than 10 years, $72 billion market. It is not accidental. I think, and I don't think this is just a theory, but Gen Z and millennials particularly like media that's interactive. They don't want any kind of linear experience. They want to be able to get into it and experience it. And as I mentioned, with the visuals, you can do that Hello Kitty's an extreme version, but you can do that with these visuals. You can also, there's a whole world around anime and manga of cosplay, costume play, dressing up, being the character, pretending to be the character. The range of genres is enormous, so you're not stuck with superheroes or superheroines. You've got manga and anime about cooking, about wine, about housekeeping. There's a manga series about bacteria. Some of you probably know. It covers the gamut, as they say, and it's interactive for a younger generation. The other thing I think that's really critical is this concept in Japanese, mokuseki. The characters are stateless or nationless. You know, if you have a superstar in Bollywood, are they going to translate in Japan? Are they going to translate as a superstar in America? Is it going to work? If you have a superhero in anime, they can go anywhere. And the ease with which you can translate and subtitle has grown dramatically in just the past 5 years. So it's so easy to see your favorite show, to see Demon Slayer, and the characters are speaking Hindi. Or they're speaking Greek, and they're your characters. You own them. They're not superheroes from a Bollywood series that is a different culture from yours. And so finally, this headline was just 3 days ago in Variety. Netflix, Disney Plus battle for anime supremacy as streaming wars enter new phase. Dentsu study reveals. Dentsu just released a study saying there's huge marketing opportunities here. I mean, no surprise to many of us, but Dentsu, if they've officially announced that, that pricks up people's ears, right? So, and the streamers and the people in streaming services off the record tell me the great thing about anime fans is they are sticky. Do you know what that means? They stay with you. If they love your streaming services and you're serving up what they love, they will stick with you. It's like fans of a cult band or a punk band or something. They'll never go away. Even if they don't like the next record, they'll still be with you, right? Whereas other kinds of fans of media they call it churn in the industry. They'll sign up for Apple TV for a month to watch their favorite series, and then they cancel. And they go to Netflix for a bit, and then they cancel. Anime fans don't do that. And that's a big reason why the business is so important to streamers today. Thanks very much. Sorry for the extra time. Thank you.
Roland, thank you. Roland, thank you very much for this very nice overview. So it appeals to the individual. It appeals to everybody without the nation. You don't have to be a Bollywood or Make America Great Again. You can just be yourself. You can control it. The revenues of Hello Kitty, by the way, are double of the revenues for Disney Princess. Now, you're the scary guy. Yes, in this group, you're a lawyer. So you're up next. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Jesper. Good evening. I have got about 9 minutes prepared, but I'm going to add about a minute on top. I didn't know you were going to have Speed Racer in there. Yeah. And when I came to Japan, I came in 1987, and about 6 months after I got here, I was living in Kyoto, working in Osaka. I had, in the same day, 2 very strange experiences. In the morning, I was going to work, walking through Umeda Station, and it was the year of the Seoul Olympics. And like every Olympics, the Japanese television manufacturers put their biggest, newest televisions in the stations, right? So everybody would go home, think, my television's too small, I want to buy a new one. And I was standing in Umeda Station watching this, what seemed like a big television to me, and saw myself on television. And it was the weirdest thing. It was a camera came in, this is before drones, probably on a helicopter, and zoomed in on a playing field at UCLA. And there I was in the university band. I was in the Stanford band, which caused a lot of consternation, so we won't talk about that. But they zoomed in, and I used to wear a mogwai. Anyone know what a mogwai is? It's a little gremlin from a movie in the 80s. I used to wear one on my shoulder, a little doll of it. And it zoomed in, and then it cut to, obviously couldn't go all the way in, cut to a handheld camera. I didn't notice it even happened, and there was me. And it was the weirdest thing to see myself on television. period, let alone in Osaka in 1988. That evening, I went out to visit some friends. There was a family I knew in the countryside in Nara, and there's a long story how I knew them, and I spent the night. And the next morning, I woke up pretty early, and I heard this music playing downstairs. And I heard this, and I thought, I know this. And when it went, I thought, why in the world is Speed Racer playing in Japan? I had no idea that Speed Racer was from Japan. That story will come back to my comments, so hang in there. So per Roland's suggestion, I'll do a brief introduction, self-introduction, and I have 3 topics I want to introduce. I'm not going to go deep into them. I'm not sure if they'll be of interest, so you can pick the ones you like and we can talk about them as we go along. So I am Geoff Wexler. I am from California, grew up on the beach in San Diego, hence the blonde hair and the blue eyes, which confuses most people a little bit. I arrived in Japan in 1987, as I mentioned, and I planned to stay a year in Kyoto, and I stayed for 3. Then I returned to the States for graduate school. I did become a lawyer, although I'm not practicing now, so hopefully not too scary. But I did come back in 93 after grad school and began a legal career that went from 93 to 2011. I was one of the first of what they call the internet lawyers, although I would argue whether there is such a thing. But I wasn't the first worked in Silicon Valley in the first internet bubble, and came back to Japan and was in practice first in firms in Tokyo and Silicon Valley, and then in-house at the Walt Disney Company in Japan and in Europe in the internet group. Then in April 2011, some of you might remember what things were like here in April 2011, I was one of the few people who came to Japan, moving from London, and I joined Studio Ghibli. And I was hired the fellow who hired me asked me to think about the role and recast it the way I thought I should. And I, like most people, I took my time to look around and see what was going on. And I recast the role as what I named Chief International. The previous fellow had called it Senior Vice President, but it was such a flat organization, there was nothing between anybody. And I was a big fan of the Chief and Get Smart, so I named myself Chief International. Because Chief is great, come on. And I adopted his hairstyle a few years later. And so I'll come back to that in a moment. And then over the years, I moved eventually to Studio Ponok. Some of you may know us. We're not real well known yet, but we're basically all Studio Ghibli graduates. When the studio shut down production in 2014, there was, I won't go through the whole story, but there was some efforts and ideas of making a new studio. So I worked at both studios for a few years, bicycling back and forth between Higashikogane and Musashi Sakai. And everyone knew this was happening because a lot of us were moving over to Ponok. And I've been at Studio Ponok ever since, officially joining in 2017. I formed my own company called Kiyuki at that time for various reasons, but my main everyday job is at Studio Ponok. That's where I went this morning, and that's where I came from today. And I'm still Chief International. When I joined Studio Ghibli, I knew nothing about film beyond what I had learned a little bit in the internet business at Disney, and I knew very little about Studio Ghibli. I knew 2 of the films. That put me in a really good position. I wasn't a fan. I wasn't, googly-eyed and amazed, and didn't know what cosplay was, and didn't know what any of it was. Didn't have any tattoos with lines from the films on my body, which is something I've had to think about over the years, because that's something I have to think about when I change lines in films and subtitles. So before I go on, I do have to give you the obligatory lawyerly comment. The views expressed by me today are not of Studio Ghibli, Studio Ponok, or any organization. They are my own, and any mistakes are my own entirely. Anything good is because...
Are you of sound mind?
I am, well, that's debatable. But anything good I say is because Roland coached me before we got here. So I want to introduce 3 topics. The first is about what I encountered when I joined Studio Ghibli and what I decided to do and what I decided to change. The second is what is my ideas on growing the business. As big as you see it as it is here, for studios like Studio Ponok and other small studios in Tokyo, it's tiny. We're not making money. We're not making, annual growth of 10% a year or any percent of a year. So, and that's a big problem as costs go up. And the last thing is, I will talk a little bit about, or introduce some concepts of what we're facing with new distribution methods and new economic realities. So with those 3 topics, again, I'm not going to go deep into them. We can go into whichever you find interesting based on other comments and your questions. So when I first joined Studio Ghibli, I encountered 2 things in particular. One, I heard a lot of grumbles, a lot of complaints about the quality of the subtitles and the dubs. Now, I didn't know them because I didn't know the films very much. And I thought, well, this is a little strange because the dubs and subs that were made by professionals, high-quality professionals, with experience in different countries. And what I learned is that the dubs were fine and the subs were fine, but they weren't the films. They were someone else's, what we called rounding off the corners version of the films. They were explanations of the story. They were filling in the gaps. And anyone who watched Japanese television and movies in Japanese television in the 80s and early 90s remember Mr. Yodobashi, who would introduce the film and introduce the film and introduce the film. So Japanese audiences had all the information about the film before they watched it. And as the characters would come on, the name of the character would come on the screen. You probably remember this. This is what was happening, I think, in the subs and the dubs. Now, I couldn't fix the old dubs. They're too expensive to do. But the timing was quite good because Ghibli was shifting from DVD to Blu-ray and from print to digital print for production. So I had a chance to work on the subtitles. So I rewrote a lot of subtitles. But remember those tattoos I mentioned? You can't change a line if someone has a tattooed on their body. And so I had to be careful what I changed. And I only was trying to fix the errors and trying to make things closer to the original films. The first line of Totoro was wrong. It wasn't what Hayao Miyazaki had in Japanese. He talked about karameru, and the line was candy. He chose karameru. And if you look at it, all of us see that gold box, and all of us have eaten that from that gold box and that wax paper, and that is what Mei Hansatsuki. So off the bat, there was some work to do. So I was working on those, and then when it came to dubbing, I flipped the process kind of on its head and took a whole other approach and became deeply involved. But before I did that, I thought, why? Why bother to do this? It would have been easy just to keep the subs as they were and do the dubs. Basically what Studio Ghibli was doing is they were throwing the film over the fence and letting professionals in Hollywood and in Paris and in Seoul and other places dub the film. And my predecessor was very interested in the business side of things. I was not, because it was royalties tracking for the most part and doing negotiating distribution deals to people who were dying to buy the films. Not exactly the hardest thing to do. But I was really interested in the creativity side of it, and of course I was handling my own contracts and doing legal as well. So I thought, why improve, separate from how to improve? The other question is, how do you evaluate your results? Which leads me to the second thing I encountered. I found out that people didn't know Studio Ghibli. They knew Hayao Miyazaki, which is cool. That's great. But they weren't watching the other films. They didn't know the other films. And I stumbled across this when we did a small theatrical distribution deal in the US with a company that's now grown beautifully since then. They wanted to show some films theatrically, and they wanted 4 films. You can guess what they are. Totoro, Mononoke, Spirited Away, and Ponyo. That's what they wanted. And I said, no. You take them all, or you don't take any. And for every Miyazaki film you show a non-Miyazaki film. And they did. And I was able to track over those 6 or 7 years that I was working daily at Studio Ghibli the change in how the studio was being perceived. Some of it was real studies, a lot of it was what was coming in my Google alert. Was it Miyazaki or was it Ghibli? And it became Ghibli, and it became Takahata, and it became other films. Turns out they love Whisper of the Heart in France. So how can we make them love Whisper of the Heart in America or in Korea or in Brazil? And this was a challenge I took on. And it was a fun challenge. It wasn't a difficult challenge because the films were great. People just didn't know about it. And so I realized that I had to bring the films to, more films to the fans. And then I thought, this is my second point, how do I grow the business? Well, what about the people who aren't fans, who don't know what anime is, probably don't care what anime is? So I realized there were all these non-anime fans. Now, a lot of them may have had a roommate in college who liked that weird anime stuff from Japan, or didn't know it at all. But I heard a story of a mother in the Plain States in the States who took her daughter to see this film called Arrietty. She didn't know about Studio Ghibli. She didn't even know the film was made in Japanese. She said her daughter didn't move a muscle for an hour and a half, which I guess was a big deal for her. And she was happy. And I realized there are all these non-anime fans to whom we could bring the films. Beautiful, hand-drawn, hand-painted animated films. Question was how to do that. And there's a risk. You do it wrong, you alienate the fans. You gotta cherish the fans. In every business, you cherish the customers you have. You have a small business with 10 customers, you cherish those customers while you try to get an 11th or a 12th. So we were doing the same thing. We were trying to figure out how to reach out to the anime fans, or how to keep the anime fans and reach out to the non-anime fans and go back to better dubs and subs. People liked the films as they were made, and all the differences of how they were made. What Roland was talking about, you talked very much about visual style, but you did refer to storytelling as well. The storytelling style was different, and apparently a lot of people liked it. So maybe more people would like it. So I realized that if I could create higher quality dubbed versions, because a lot of, especially in America, they don't like subtitles. Now it's changed in the streaming era, but until the streaming era, no one watched subtitles except for French, foreign live action films. If we did a better job with the dubbing, maybe I could persuade people they were made in English. Maybe they would never even have to know they were made in Japanese. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that and changing the processes to create that, and had some evidence that it started to succeed, while we continue to release the subtitle versions for those fans who don't speak a word of Japanese but have to listen to the Japanese version. Their whole personality is built on watching the original. It's like, great, you watch that, but what about everybody else? So that was something I had. I had this opportunity and this risk. And the last thing I'll bring up, and then we can talk about more later as you like, and is how do we navigate the new distribution methods now and changing economic realities we have now. So when I started, it was theatrical, cable, free TV, package. Those are the windows. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very simple. And then if you're lucky, you could bring your films back in event screenings. Now it's streaming. Ijo. And that's it. It's streaming, and if you're lucky, a theatrical release. And why is it lucky? Because people just aren't going. And the story I'll tell is in a recent Studio Ponok film, our most recent film was called The Imaginary. We commissioned a song for the end of the film, kind of like theme song of the film, a beautiful song called Nothing's Impossible, sang by a well-known US duo. And the film came out. It did have a short awards qualifying release. And one of the singers said, how come it's not having a longer run? He's a guy in his 30s. And I said, would you take your family to the cinema to see a film? He goes, oh, I don't go to cinemas. I'm like, there it is. So if you're not going to cinemas, who's going to cinemas? And so that's the reality we live in. Now, we've been working with Netflix. Netflix is an excellent partner. No buts, no ums, absolutely an excellent partner. They do what they say they're going to do, and they do it beautifully. But there are things they don't do. They don't promote my brand. How am I going to grow the Studio Ponok brand? And they have no incentive to, and I don't expect them to. So this is a challenge we face. I also believe in patience. I believe that audiences will discover these films over time. While some there'll be these big hits, there are many, many, many shows and many, many films that have not been discovered yet. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think those non-anime fans are a big part of that. And I believe in non-US markets strongly, deeply. And there are a lot of markets out there where there's a lot of interest, and it's shifting. But the interest in anime in Central Asia and in the Middle East is skyrocketing by all accounts. And the interest in investing, silent, quiet, we won't be involved, we won't disturb your production investment from the Middle East is growing. One of the films I worked on that's not a Ghibli film and not a Ponok film was very successful in Qatar. I wouldn't have expected that. People won awards, they kept screening it, they kept calling me and saying, we want to screen it over here, we want to screen it over there. They had kids showing up in costumes. I wouldn't have expected that. The last thing that I'll mention is the costs going up. And this I know you face every day. So costs are going up and availability of staff is going down. It's a nasty combination. The hand-drawn, hand-painted experts are aging out for the most part, so we have to train them. I did work with Shuzo on a project called Ronya the Robber's Daughter years ago. It was a Goro Miyazaki piece based on a beautiful novel from Sweden. And it was a nice blend of hand-drawn, hand-painted, and computer-generated. But I even felt it then. Where are you going to find the people? So we're training them. At Studio Ponok, we're training people. We have 2 different training programs for keyframe animators and for general animators for different roles. And we also are trying to stay ahead of the challenges of low wages and high hours, trying to stay way ahead of what the government's trying to require. It's great for the atmosphere of the studio, but the costs just go up. The number of frames doesn't go down. The number of paintings doesn't go down. Mary and the Witch's Flower, the first film of Studio Ponok, 130,000 pieces of art. That's in the final film. That's not concept art and character design and color sketches and production design. That's the final film. Our current film is slated at 180,000 pieces of paper art, background paintings, and animated paintings, animated drawings. So these are some of the challenges we face. So the rosy picture that Roland faced, it hasn't trickled quite down to Musashi Sakai yet. And I think I'll leave it there, and we can come back to anything that you find of interest.
No, fantastic, Geoffrey. Thank you very much for sort of being hands-on. For 30 seconds, let me ask one question. So how do you promote your movies if Netflix doesn't do it for you?
We're trying to decide how to do that because we don't have buckets of money to promote. So we're trying to be clever about it. And this is something that AI is not going to solve. Apparently, it's not going to solve everything as far as we can tell. So we are looking at ways to promote our own brand. Our next film is slated to come out in the near future is probably all I can say, but not this year. So I've got a bit of a window to figure out how to grow brands. And I don't know yet. I've spoken with professionals who have grown franchises. For example, I spoke with a fellow who grew the Minions franchise very successfully, and we're trying to figure out some of the secrets there. But unfortunately, we're a production studio that has a little international department. We're not a studio that has a full marketing team and a full international team. So we don't know yet, but we're gonna have to spend our own money because what Netflix does is so good, we don't want to break that. The Imaginary is in 16 dubbed languages. I produce the English and they produce the others. And then it's in 32 subtitle languages I never would have guessed, in every country that Netflix is in. So it's been seen by more people than any of the films I worked on at Studio Ghibli, frankly, because until this streaming started. So I don't want to break that. And we haven't announced whether we're continuing every film with Netflix, but there's certainly a partner we'd love to continue to talk with. So it's just a missing piece. And the answer is I don't know yet.
Right. Shuzo, last but not least.
Hi, Shuzo Shiota. Thank you for having me here. It's kind of surreal. I was joking with the guys that this is the very room that I had my wedding reception almost 30 years ago for my first marriage. So go figure. It didn't work out that well, but it's a very nice room. Nice to be back here. It's not the room's fault, actually. So yeah, I mean, disclaimer, I didn't have much interaction with the guys before this very day, so I didn't realize there was going to be a full-blown keynote happening or something. So I'm going to be jamming as I go along. I was asking Roland, so what are we going to do with this first 10 minutes? He's like, just share a video. So I was just going to, yeah, I know. So I brought a video, but just a big explanation, background about myself and what I represent. I represent a company called Polygon Pictures, which has been around for 42 years now, which is a pride of ourselves. We are a computer graphics animation company. And so we are not the first to be created in the world or in Japan for that matter. There has been names that has presided us, but major name, and so I mean, of course, all of you probably know Pixar, but we have been established before Pixar, and these names that were bigger than us have ceased to exist in brand, and therefore, I mean, George Lucas's ILM, it has been before us and still continues to exist. However, I regard that as a VFX company more than a CG animation company. So as far as I know, and I've been saying this for the past few years, in all over the world, and so as far as I know, and nobody has disputed me thus far, I think we are the longest standing CG animation company in the world, and which is a pride of mine, being in a country where the last country where hand-drawn animation still exists and is run supreme. So it's been hard, but we're still here, so we're very happy. Yeah, given, and especially given, computer graphics has not been around for so long. The term computer graphics was coined apparently in 1960 by a guy called Bob Fetter, who was working at Boeing at that time, designing the interiors of an airplane, and he was using a really early computer 3D kind of architecture thing, and he coined the name computer graphics. And it was groomed by, as all things digital, by the military in the United States, like the internet and all these things. But pretty soon these engineers started making like ad hoc games, in their spare time, and that turned into a certain usage in entertainment. The most prominent of which was in Star Wars in 1977. And if you remember the meeting they had about how to confront the Death Star in the plotting, that was one of the first instances. Tron was one of the first cases where CG animation was used prominently for 15 minutes. Most all of the studios that was involved in that creation, actually all of it, ceased to exist after a few years, which was probably a sign of how hard it was. And we're here in 1983. So, it's still, compared to hand-drawn animation, which has been around for more than 100 years, CG animation is a relatively new medium. We have a studio in Tokyo, and we have which comprises about anywhere between 250 to 300 people. One of the things that we pride ourselves is that about 15% of our team is from other countries. So currently we have about 19 different countries represented. Our language is Japanese. However, even if you're not able to speak Japanese, if you can speak English, it's okay. We have 14 translators, interpreters working full-time. So now in the world of Zoom, a lot of where there's double channels, and where they are non-Japanese speaking staff, or when we're talking with clients overseas, there's two channels, either in Japanese or English, for those who understand either. So I think we're one of the most diverse company in all the industries in Japan. We have a studio in Malaysia that's been around for 12 years now, which comprises about 80 people. And then we have a studio in India, which is about 30 people right now, which is our youngest sister. So altogether, we are about 400 in staff. And this is a reel. So our recent work, so the thing about us is that 50%, in the best of times, about 50% of our clientele is from North America and 50% from Japan. In fact, our Japanese market is a newer entry. We started doing, so we're not an anime studio per se, we're a digital animation studio. And our first foray into anime was about 11 years ago, Ronya being our second project. And so, but the good thing is that we have two markets. So we may not be in the pinnacle of these two markets like the Ghiblis or the Pixars, but we are I think one of the very few or the only studio that has a strong footing in both mountains. And so we pride ourselves in being in between these two markets. One film that's still going on, it's going into its 5th month almost, is one called Hypnosis Bike, which is I don't know if you've seen it, but it's so very, very Japanese. It's a rap battle film. And it started with a producer thinking, well, hey, it might be really cool to have voice actors and actresses rap and have a CD out. And it turned out to sell like crazy. And it turned out to be second in line towards like Arashi, the boy bands, you know? And it went for a long time just selling CDs with illustrations that was the emblem of these bands. And then animation came relatively much later, after 7-8 years, and this is the first film depicting the band. The thing about this film is that it's a so-called interactive film, in that the fans, when you go see the film, you download an app. And so it's a rap battle. There's 7 teams battling within the film. It's about 110 minutes, and there's 3 levels of battles. After each battle, you're given 10 seconds to vote with the app. And based on the voting, there's 40 different storylines, 7 different endings, which is why people go there multiple times. So the main demographic are about 90% plus young adult females, and this is, you know, and so this is not the typical anime going crowd. It's more of a boy band chasing crowd, and so
Here, I've seen this.
so you're the 10% of the demographic. Thank you. So yeah, I've known of people who've gone see them more than 100 times. And what's interesting is that these teams are represented: Shibuya team, Ikebukuro team, Shinjuku team, Nagoya team, Osaka team, Chuoku team. So obviously, and we put out on our website the voting statistics of each of the showings. Obviously, you know, in Ikebukuro Theater, there's a high chance that the Ikebukuro team wins. In the Shibuya Theater, there's a high chance Shibuya team wins. But, well, what if you are a fan of the Osaka team, but are you in Tokyo? So what's interesting is that theaters like Shinagawa, which is like neutral, tend to be very populated. And so the fans would communicate amongst themselves, let's go see this, and this is in time, and let's get the Osaka team to win. So it's become a very communal thing, you know? And when you go, and I usually go and sit on the back seat, and it's really interesting because like each team is comprised of three people, and each team has a color, and so we have these color rings, and so it's dark, and we go like, you know, like this. It's like a live thing happening, you know. It's more so. There's been talk about interactive storytelling. It never really actually works, but this works because it's not interactive storytelling. It's more of interacting with the storyline to promote your team, and so hence it's a longer run for this type of film. It's going 20 oku yen, so it's pretty damn good. So on the half side, we do big properties like Marvel. This is a thing that's going on right now at Disney Plus. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. The second season is being currently produced. Also in October, we will have an episode of Star Wars Vision. So we've done quite a bit of Star Wars properties as well. We're really good friends with Dave Filoni. So you've been talking about Netflix being really good. Yes, they've been really good. We were the first studio to contract with Netflix, providing Netflix original anime. Just because we were not an insider of the anime team, we had to find a place to find, you know, placing inside the one. So when everybody was afraid, everybody was saying, oh, when Netflix, Kurofune, Black Ship Perry is coming. We said, I don't care. You know, it's like we don't have a place in Japan. We've got to find this place. So Netflix has been good for, you know, this about a decade. But the industry in America has been terrible in the past 3 years. And we didn't have any project greenlit on the 50% side for the last 3 years. Many studios have actually crashed in the States, in Europe, and also in India because of and the main player that made it crash initially was Netflix, and I'm not going into that further. We can talk about this. But we were able to sustain ourselves within these 3 years because the Japanese market, albeit the projects are much smaller, the budgets are lower, but it's still green lighting a lot of stuff, and so that's how we've been able to survive. not only have we sustained ourselves, we've been winners of many accolades in the past. We're multiple Emmy Awards winners, Peabody Awards, which is like the Academy Awards of TV animation. And more than our accolades, you know, what I pride myself actually in is a range of friends that have sent us video messages in our 40th anniversary, and we paid them nothing, and they just shoot. And then, so I mean, people like Jim Morris, who's the president of Pixar, and Pete Docter, who's the chief creative officer of Pixar, have sent messages. Greg, who's the co-CEO of Netflix, has sent messages. And I mean, Spider-Verse directors and like Oshii-san from the Japanese industry, Kodansha president, all these people, Kojima Hideo, you know, Minions director Kawabata, Dave Filoni, all these people we've had grassroots connections with. And which is why, you know, that is our sustenance, you know. Our business is based on relationships, and real relationships, and that's what I think is our biggest treasure. A little bit myself. Now, Roland, you said you were not an otaku. Jeff, you said you didn't know much about films when you came into the industry. I am a multiple Emmy Award winner. And because I'm the very few Japanese national in the anime industry who can actually speak English, I get to go to a lot of different countries to talk about anime. Last week I was in Cote d'Ivoire in an event that was sponsored by the government. You were talking about Middle East. I'm a board of director of a company called Manga Productions in Saudi Arabia, which is a company that is, you know, directly sponsored by the prince. So I get to go to a lot of places and talk about animation in Japan. However, I say publicly that I am the least otaku in the industry. I mean, I know more about music than I know about anime, and I'm sure some of you here in the audience watch more anime than I do. But I'm fascinated by the structure of things and how these stories are created. And oh, sorry, yeah, I mean, just a little, yeah. And because of my experiences outside, promoting the anime industry outside, I won a Special Achievement Award by the Media Arts Festival. But my first job was with a steel company, Nippon Steel, because I wanted to be. I was kind of a socialist during all through college, and I felt it really romantic to be in helmets and steel toe and working with the people making steel. This is me in 1991, and I had a 3-month internship in Yamata steel plant, and I loved it. But I wasn't commissioned there. They commissioned me to this new department because 1991 was the age of the bubble still, and every company in Japan was doing different things, and they commissioned me in this department where Nippon Steel did the first B2C by making a notebook computer, which was very rare at that time. And I was thinking, oh my God, you know, computers are so evil because it takes away people's jobs, you know. And but here I am. So my message is that I perceive. So I was born in Japan. I moved to the States when I was 6. This was early 70s, and I spent 9 years there till middle sophomore year of high school. And then I came and trying to be as American as possible because, you know, we're talking about anime being cool Japan. Japan was definitely not cool. I mean, being Asian was definitely not cool. And I was born a Catholic, and I went to most Catholic schools, and so my mom would put me into Catholic schools, which were like predominantly white. And so my way of survival was to be as American as possible, as quickly as possible, and spend 9 years trying to do so. So this notion of Japan being cool, anime being cool, Japanese pop culture being cool is just mind-blowing to me, you know, all these years later. And as such, I'm trying to figure out, I've been spending quite a bit of time trying to figure out why that is such. And I have lots of theories as to why, because they call people like me third culture kids, where you're grown up in a culture where it's distant from yourself. And so I have a perspective of things that is quite objective. Again, because I'm coming from a manufacturing background, I perceive animation production as manufacturing. So I have a TED talk called Manufacturing Animation, where I employ a lot of Kaizen practices that was used by manufacturing into animation, because from my standpoint, making animation is quite the same as manufacturing. It's just all digital, in our case. And it's been why, despite the cost surge, we've been able to kind of sustain ourselves for all these years, despite the fact that Japan has no incentives whatsoever, where European countries have a lot of incentives. Japan is a pretty costly country, where we're battling, countries like in India, where man-hour costs are lower. And so the way we've been able to compete is because of our creativity, as well as our efficiency. So those are the things that I've been able to, based on my upbringing. And so before you guys shoot this question, isn't like anime low wages, long hours, and whatever. Some were and used to be, like for instance, our overages in terms of what do you call zangyo? What do you call zangyo? Overtime. Yeah, overtime is like, about a month. For a month, average is about 19, 20 hours, which means like 1 hour of overtime per, day, which is, probably shorter than most other industries, So there's a lot of facets to the world of animation. So that's me.
Shuzo, fantastic. And I want to thank, the three of you.